Chapter 1, War of the Void. In the beginning there was light and darkness, solace and space. A great battle ensued between the light and the dark. Each wished to consume all space and void with its essence. From the battle came the color and power of the elements, which clashed with fury between the light and the dark. Such fury that each element fused with another, and with such a force created matter and magic that shaped the world, and all the beings in the plane of Dal Ruin. Age of the Feyrens, around 2 BF. The first beings of Dal Ruin came from pure magic and were said to be immortal. These first-generation immortals were known as Feyrens and appeared to be adults upon being formed. There were many Feyrens, but there were 4 that became legendary and are still a part of Dal Ruin history. They were the first leaders of Dal Ruin. Only one king was needed. As the land was fruitful, the never-aging Feyrens always looked to the light, and it was good. Soon there would be children. These children were known as the second generation, and would be more easily swayed by the darkness. So each Feyron ruled for 60 years. Zumos was a male human warrior who rules through 10 AF to 70 AF. Thetaress was a female human warrior, ruled through 70 AF to 130 AF. Duadu, male dwarf warrior, rules from 130 AF through 190 after Feyrens. Romulus was a male elf wizard, who ruled 190 AF to 250 AF. Chapter 3. The Second Generation, around 99 AF. The second generation had begun. These beings were born of the Feyrens and were known as humans, dwarves and elves, and were just as the Feyrens were. Though there were half-breeds, they were usually outcast from capital cities and considered lower class than the tall, sleek humans and elves and Feyrens. Most dwarves hid away in the darkness of the mountains. The history of alignment. All matter in the beginning came from the colorful elemental magics. They have all been fused by the light and the dark into neutral beings. The good and the evil sides, such as the light and the dark, sway the neutral beings and make them struggle for power and morals according to which alignment they were, such as good or evil. The finding of the elements. The elemental power in Dal Ruin comes from crystals hidden beneath the ground. This was discovered early on by Dal Ruin engineers and wizards around the year 232 after Feyrens, which would have been the second generation. The decay of the Feyron. The second generation of beings descended from the Feyrens were normal, humans, dwarves and elves. They seemed weaker and less than Feyron. Eventually the next generation began to decay and become withered and aged by time. Gradual decay leading to death. This caused a malaise among the immortal Feyrens, and caused them to hide away in tombs and other planes, forever weeping over the loss of their dead children. These were the remnants of the Feyron, the Feyrens' betrayal. Around 270 AF, after Feyrens, there was a Feyron who was experimenting with dark magics. This Feyron, known as Thetaress, opened a portal to a plane known as Hell. Upon opening the portal, Thetaress was spoken to by the darkness. Having stumbled upon an evil far greater than Dal Ruin had ever seen, the Feyron was offered power in the form of a staff in return for his soul. Thetaress accepted, unknowing that the soul was the very elemental essence of one's self. The darkness had spoken. Reaching for the staff through the portal, Thetaress felt his life force fade to the darkness and wanted nothing more to do with such evil. At that moment, upon losing his soul, Thetaress fled to the Feyron council with the staff, and gathered the highest among the Feyrens in a great meeting. In sorrow and anger over the loss of his soul, Thetaress threw down the staff and begged the light for forgiveness. Upon touching the ground, the staff exploded into a black portal, flowing wildly with evil presence. This was a trap. 4 high Feyrens were sucked into the portal, losing their souls as well. The Age of Demons. Upon losing the 5 Feyron souls to the darkness, the darkness had become even more powerful than ever before. Learning a great deal of Dal Ruin history from the souls, the darkness wanted more of this newfound world. Using the souls of the Feyrens, The darkness was able to open a portal in Dal Ruin, unleashing demons, monsters and much more horrid things upon the lands. It seemed darkness was taking over and all light was diminishing. Thetaress and the rest of the Pheyren council fled in fear and shame, hiding away in tombs and hidden locations to forever slumber and leaving Dal Ruin and all of its demons and darkness to be handled by the next generations of mankind, the humans, dwarves and elves. The Age of Kings. As the Feyrens had left, a great meeting in the halls of the elven capital Kelos Nera was held. The considered wisest and greatest among each race were appointed to be kings. Through self-greed and fear of the demons, there wasn't enough room in one place for all races to hide. There were 3 kings. Each king had different ideas and could not agree on what to do of the demons and monsters. So the dwarves, humans, and elves split up to govern their own lands, each in a unique way. The dwarves to their mountains, the elves to the trees, and the humans to the open plain. 2 of the kings were sons of Feyrens directly, even taking the name of their Pheyren fathers. The demon war, after being beaten down again and again around 310 AF. The humans and the dwarves have had enough. The darkness of the mountains and the plains were overrun with monsters and demons. The elves lived easy and had the help of the tree ants and the surrounding forest, guarding the lush valley of Quillows. King Baron of North Keep decided to gather his army and march on the foul creatures that terrorized his homeland. He called for the Silver Sword Riders of Owen, led by the knight captain known as Dalruan. The king's many attacks did not slow the creatures. They kept advancing towards North Keep. The strong walls held out the foul beasts for many years. The Great Eye. Long ago, when the Great Eye was first discovered, around 312 AF, there was a passage in the northeast mountains, discovered by King Baron, the first king that established Grandaberg as a human territory reaching outward from Talondale. This passage would since then be named Baron's Pass. It was this passage that lead through the mountain out the other side, also a separate passage that lead underneath the Great Eye. There was also a discovery, which would lead to great magical power. The king discovered that underneath the Great Eye, there was a huge 4-foot-long transparent crystal. As it glows with all colors, waving and weaving in and out of its spectrum. King Baron told no one of the crystal and left, for fear that it would aid the wizards of the north, and not his knightly realm of Grandaberg, and North Keep.
Such power should only be held by a sword and shield.
This was a time when human kings feared magic, and the Circle of Seven was yet to be formed. Magic was not accepted yet, as the people like their kings feared it. Then arose a council, named the Circle of Seven, as each school of underground magic came forth in a great meeting with King Baron at the capital North Keep. Dwarves, humans and elves alike demonstrated the magic that they have mastered, some stronger than others, but at this time, after showing the king, he began to want magic in his kingdom. He then remembered the crystal. He thought for years of what it could do if he knew the ways of magic. He wished to harness its power. The king welcomed all magics into the human realms as regular practice. He then wished to use magic for military purposes. A few years later, he hired the strongest of each school of magic, and allowed the construct of the Circle of Seven headquarters. A circle of 7 towers to the north of the king's castle, each dedicated to its own school of magic. The king wanted the mages to train, study and discover more magic, honing all magics for practical, political and militant purposes. But the king could not do this alone. He had the dwarves assembled the towers as they were masters of stone. Upon completion of the towers, Lumek, who was appointed High Cleric of the Tower of Light at the Circle of Seven, asked the king if in his lifetime of battles and travel, had he ever collected any magical items he wished the circle to study. The king then told Lumek of the crystal he had once long ago found and left underneath the Great Eye. The councils assembled all the highest mages from each tower to accompany Lumek in his journey to find the crystal. Rizer's corruption. Lumek's team of wizards found the crystal. taking it back to the Circle of Seven. Upon study at the White Mage Tower, Lumek discovered that the crystal was indeed magical, and held much power. This could aid in the war of demons. So then, the crystal was said to be one of the king's greatest treasures, but the mages wanted more. They wanted to establish themselves outside of the king's court. They wanted some power for themselves as thought to be the mine for the human kingdom. The crystal had been taken in the night by a necromancer of the Circle of Seven. His name was Rizer. Pieces were cut from the crystal, which Rizer formed into orbs, each orb a different color, to which he drained his soul while forming. Each held a different elemental property. Now each tower had a relic of power, given to the highest wizard of each tower. The colors of the orbs were red, which was of the element of fire; blue, for ice; yellow, stood for lightning; brown, for earth; gray, for summoning; black, which was for dark magic; and white, which was for the light of holy magic. This would eventually lead to Rizer's corruption. Rizer gave each of the 7 orbs to the highest wizard of each school at the Circle of Seven. He said it was a gift from the king. He then took what was left of the crystal, and had it forged into a blade by the dwarves of Rainfall. It was then known as the Ancient King's Great Sword. This blade was given to the king and held almost godly power. The king was gracious of the necromancer, but he was not rewarded. Rizer, realizing he gave all the orbs to other mages, and no longer had what he felt he poured his very soul into, felt jealous, and wished reward greater than he could ever have received from the king. He then turned back to the throne, where the king sat admiring his new blade.
So, Baron, no reward for such a weapon?
The king looked up, and then said,
You are lucky I allowed the Circle of Seven. Go back to your tower, as it is the tower I let you live. Study and do your magic,
said the king, in rage. He still had his doubts regarding the wizards. Rizer left the throne room. Rizer returned to the tower, where he went mad, wishing he still had some of the new felt power from all the orbs. He wished to have them back.
They will be mine, all the orbs, then I shall take back the blade. My blade. The Ancient King's Great Sword will be mine once and for all time.
Rizer was stopped upon trying to take the red orb from its spot on the top level of the tower by the highest of the Red Robes, Ordum, and his second-in-command, Till. Walk no further in the Valley of the Flame. Necro. Why do you wish to take the orb? Rizer was then imprisoned upon trying to escape. The king then banished Rizer from the realms of Tylondale and Grandaburg for attempting to steal from the kingdom. Who knows what magics are held within the dwarven halls of Rainfall, or the trees of the elven Kellos Nera, or even the fiery chasm of Palderan. The age or power. Rizer had been corrupted. His body decayed and his eyes turned white as he had turned undead. Swayed by the darkness, he took his magics to the demons. Though King Baron had found power himself within his new blade and his Circle of Seven, which he had yet to know were plotting against him, for they had the power of the orbs. Which side would win? The demons with their newfound leader, the corrupted Rizer, King Baron and the Silver Sword Riders of Owen? Or possibly the Circle of Seven high-up wizards with the new power of the orbs? The time of corruption, with the battle getting closer, the demons gathering, the horsemen at the gates of North Keep. Ordam waits at the top of his tower. The young elven fire mage sat. He had a red robe with brims of yellow down the arms. He was very wise, as his father Elos, the High Pharaon, had taught him to be. Clasping his staff, and the orb of fire, he wondered what the other mages were plotting. He did not dislike King Baron, and thought his deeds were noble and for the good of mankind. His power had yet to be swayed by the darkness as it has swayed most of the high-ups in the circle. He did not fear for himself, he feared for the council. Seeing so much corruption around him, Ordam and his second-in-command Till sent out messages to their friends within other councils. asking them for aid, as they knew the high-ups were plotting against the entire council and King Baron. The high-ups knew of a great demon beyond our plane. The demon's name was Haritu, and the necromancers of the circle wished to summon and enslave it for the creation of magical weapons. Ordum knew this was blasphemy. All of Ordum's closest friends and highest mages came to him and had stolen all 7 of the crystal orbs. The sacrifice. Ordum pled with each wizard, telling them of the Feyrens, telling of the darkness and the light, asking the wizards of each school if they would sway from the darkness, and become a part of history forever. Perhaps even more so than the Feyrens. Ordum and Till explained that the end times were near and asked the mages to give their lives for one last fight, and to aid their kings once more.
Stand up now, great wizards of the elements. Look outside our windows. See the armies of undead and demons. What shall we do? Our magic will be exhausted and we will surely die tonight. But if we unite and give ourselves to the kingdom, we will live forever.
And so the wizards jumped off of the tower using the power of the orbs, flying down to King Baron. Tears in their eyes, they knew this was their last flight. They flew faster through the night sky.
It was a pleasure, good friend,
Till said to Ordum.
It was all mine,
said Ordum with a smile.
Let's get a move on.
As Ordum took off, flying down even faster, leaving a trail of flame in the sky, advancing on the keep of King Baron. The king's men were ready to charge the hordes of demons and undead, eyes glowing red in the cold of the night. The second knight, Captain Thetaress, stood at the front of the lines on his charger. Holding back the tears from the sight of his slain family days before, he wished for power to slay the foul beasts. A loud crash was heard. Ordum stood up from the wreckage. King Baron rode to Ordum's landing site.
Greetings, wizards, come to join the battle? Then ready your magic,
the king said, and with a joyous smirk. We have come to aid you and sway the fate of mankind back to the light.
We give ourselves for the good of Dal Ruin,
said Ordum. Words mutter from the mage rang out into the darkness, and all the king's men looked back.
Come, my good friends, for the end.
As Ordum looked to the mages and the king, he walked to his friend Till.
Are you ready?
Ordum said softly.
Yes, I am Ordum. I have had a great time being your apprentice. For the end,
Till replied. Ordum and Till yelled magical words to the Silver Sword army. The 2 mages, engulfed in flames, shot to one another and fused together as one. As the smoke and ash fell, the flames went away, revealing a shining essence. The king looked closer. As he approached it, wondering what it was, the other mages began to chant as well, each doing the same as Ordum and Till, each exploding with its own element, flame, ice, and lightning, as well as other schools of magic exploding with the clashes of each wizard and their apprentice. King Baron looked even closer toward Ordum and noticed a shining sword where the 2 mages had slammed together. The king clasped the hilt, and pulled upward, tearing the sword from the ground. The blade was red, and on it was etched the word, Ordum Till. This was the sword of flame. The king began to look around, seeing a number of weapons, each the same as Ordum Till but a different color. Looking below the weapons, there were the orbs of each element made by Rizer. They were taken by the king. The weapons scattered about were known as Ordum Till, the sword of fire; Frismort, the sword of ice; Turenlock, the sword of lightning; and Morstelaunt, the sword of pestilence. The king grabbed Ordum Till and called out,
Thetaress, come forward.
Thetaress rode quickly past the ranks.
Yes, good king,
he replied.
A gift from a good friend.
As he handed the red blade upward to Thetaress on his charger. Just then, an explosion was heard. The enemy started the assault with legions of ballista blasts. Rocks flew. King Baron yelled charge. As the silver sword advanced on the demons, Thetaress slashed away into the night, until every last demon was slain in a fiery death by Ordum Till. Unfortunately Rizer was unseen and the other weapons were lost among the wreckage, and ruins of buildings and ballista remnants were all that was left. The battle had been won and the weapons were forgotten. All but Ordumtil, which was given to Thetaress. The blade would be passed to each knight captain of the Silver Sword for generations to come. The cover-up. After the battle the king established the Knights of Owen as the greatest army in the world. Led by Knight Captain Thetaress. A great feast was held in the halls of North Keep. The king vowed to protect the orbs from Rizer for the rest of his days. The Circle of Seven still had conflicts with the king as explained previously by Ordum. The high-ups were in a strive for power, as they had seen what it could do for the Circle upon receiving the elemental orbs from Rizer. They wished to be above the king, and were plotting against him. Baron wondered why the Circle of Seven was assembled so far north away from the capital North Keep. He sent a team of sword guard assassins to find out why. They returned with information of a cover-up of a secret passage leading down to the center of Dal Ruin. The passage came to an enormous cavern. This cavern held an enormous titan, which turned the wheel of the sun. It was pure magic. The high-up corrupt wizards wished to destroy the titan, and stop the wheel, causing the sun to stop rotating around Dal Ruin. The king had to put an end to the Circle of Seven, but would wait for the circle to strike first. Rizer's plan. Years had passed. The time was around 315 AF. Rizer had read an ancient manuscript of about an evil human Feyren known as Aranat who had thought long been slain by the hand of his own son Baxter. A human Dark Knight. Aranat claimed in the manuscripts that he would reappear and aid anyone who would grant vengeance on his son Baxter. Such an ancient power would be a great aid for Rizer. So he sent out undead to scourge the lands in an attempt to find Baxter. He was found after only a few days. Rizer transformed the Dark Knight into a Feyrens and trapped him inside of a tomb. Moments later Rizer heard a voice.
I have been granted vengeance. I will assist you, mortal.
Rizer knew it was Aranat the evil Feyren.
Master, I have granted your vengeance. Will you help me take back what is mine?
The necromancer hissed with joy.
What is it you seek?
Aranat's thunderous voice rang out.
My elemental orbs. A powerful source of energy,
said Rizer.
I have something better. I can give you Haritu from the plane of hell. He wishes to visit and conquer Dal Ruin.
Spoke Aranat once again.
Yes,
said Rizer. Aranat then told Rizer to gather magical weapons and items for the summoning. He then handed Rizer a scroll to read.
Thank you, Dark One,
Aranat said as his voice faded back to the shadow. Atop the mountains in Shadow's power Rizer took the scroll, scattered about the magical items on the ground and began to read. The ground shook and a portal opened. Out stepped a giant red-winged demon, holding a 12-foot-long spiked glowing sword.
Hail Haritu,
cried Rizer. The demon stepped down, took a giant breath, flames spilling from his nostrils. Haritu let out a roar that was heard by the dwarves of Rainfall close to 100 miles away.
Who dares wake me?
Yelled the demon. Looking around Haritu sees the items scattered about and begins to eat. Growing in size and strength Haritu stands now around 20 feet tall.
Such a weapon is no longer suitable.
Haritu throws his sword on the ground.
You, mortal, where is this world's greatest magic?
Shouted the demon. Rizer points towards North Keep.
Go the Haritu, find the king of Dal Ruin. He has a mighty weapon. Take it for yourself.
The mighty demon Haritu busts down the castle walls and heads for the keep.
Baron, I come for the greatest weapons in the lands. Give them to me and your death shall be swift.
Haritu says as he stomps into the keep, breaking down the door. One of the king's men yells for his life.
Demon, the king has left to the Circle of Seven to the north.
Haritu spreads his wings and takes flight. Rizer, watching from the mountains, laughs with joy. King Baron was taking care of the Circle of Seven. He removed all of the mages that were attempting to slay the Mithril Titan. He then appointed a white mage named Dalruan to be the highest wizard in the Tower of Light. Upon taking his seat, he heard the demon's voice.
Baron, I have come for your blade.
The king, opening the door, saw the demon. Dalruan then called upon all the mages to the circle to cast upon the demon. Dalruan channeling a white beam upon Haritu, holding him in place. Haritu is then entrapped inside of a magical book that Dalruan had created. The book was then sealed by the king and hung by chains on the door leading down to the center of Dal Ruin, to the giant cavern which held the mithril titan. The book would be kept secret from everyone. He then placed a giant stone slab above the stairway, so that the entrance would never be seen again. The Age of Light. The world was at peace once again. The new High Cleric Dalruan, guardian over all of the elemental orbs, had established himself as one of the wisest humans since his Pharaon father Lumek. Dalruan appointed many wizards to teach each school of magic. As each tower had to have a master, and each master had many apprentices. The Circle of Seven was doing better than ever. Gold and riches came to North Keep from the Circle. Unfortunately, gold cannot buy time. King Baron was very old, and had fallen in love with an elven woman named Nalari, who had left her home and came from Kelasnira. Him in his old age telling the young elf of his tales of adventure soon after inspired her to write into stories over many years, compiling them into a book. Near the time of King Baron's death, she sent the book to Romulus, the elven king of all of Lydalus, so he and the elves may learn of the human king and his realm. The Tree of Baron. King Baron died 316 AF. Nalari then gifted his blade to Romulus, the king of the elves. As Romulus accepted the gift, he wished the king to be buried in the lush forest of Kelasnira. The sword was slung into the ground atop King Baron's grave. The day after the burial, Romulus noticed that the blade had transformed into a great tree. The elves studied this tree and found it very magical. The king adored the tree, and took a vow to keep it safe, for it would be part of elven history forever. Through the next few years, elves had a higher intelligence and linked the enhanced knowledge to the tree through studies and tests. The elves did have higher intelligence after the tree came about. Romulus then stated that the tree is to the elves as the caves and mountains to the dwarves.
We must cherish the tree for eternity.
The elves thought the same, and so the tree was the elves' greatest treasure. The third generation. The age of the second generation was over. The year was 350 AF. All three kings had died. The next generation of kings was soon appointed. The next human king was Doratalhumos. The next elven king was Romulus. And the next dwarven king was Duadu. Only the humans each generation would appoint a new bloodline to be king, thus changing the name of the royal family over the generations. In this age the elves and dwarves thought the human bloodline had become weak because of this. The elves and dwarves thought the opposing race was weak since the beginning of Dal Ruin history, but a new bloodline for human royalty was thought to be preposterous. The servant of the darkness. The darkness was still and the light flourished. Hell is still holding the 5 souls of the long-forgotten Feyrens. The darkness was diminishing. It needed new form, a new voice to sway the world to evil, so that the darkness could grow once again. The darkness came together and used the power of the 5 Pheyron souls to create a servant. A portal was soon opened in the mountains of Brincha. Dark clouds followed as thunder was heard. The animals of the area fled in terror as the ground began to decay and rot beneath the portal. Up from the soil came maggots and worms. Out stepped the servant as it hissed its name.
Sargoth.
The name came from the darkness. Sargoth shape-shifted into an old man, cloaked in a perfect black robe with a hood. The cuffs had a dark blood-red lining. His black eyes rolled back, as his new grey eyes came forward. He reached into the portal, and took out a small bag. The bag was made of flesh and bone. As the bag left the darkness of the portal, it quickly turned into a small leather bag. Sargoth looked over the mountains to the east, seeing a black tower surrounded by swamp and decaying land.
Even this place will be more welcoming than the world I will soon bring,"
hissed Sargoth, as he started towards the tower. Rizer the decrepit sitting in his tower. 3 magic cubes hanging from the dark throne-like area he called home. Powerful Rizer had become, yet he saw fear once again as the servant entered his keep.
"Who are you, Dark One?"
asked Rizer, his decaying lips shuddering as he clasps his staff.
"I am the servant of the darkness, the slayer of hopes and dreams. I am the shadow of the light,"
hissed Sargoth as he flew at Rizer, grabbing his throat.
"I will assist you, master. Please spare me. I am a servant of the darkness as well,"
Rizer said as he choked.
"This will not do. I must dwell in darkness, not atop a tower in the sun. Find me a lair."
The servant had spoken. Romulus the seer. Days earlier, Romulus, the king of the elves, had a vision. Since he had been around the great tree in Kelisnera his entire life, this gave him minor foresight of major events. Romulus had awakened due to the vision of a dark essence coming to destroy Kelisnera. He saw the dark being flying over the trees, and into the king's great tree, turning it black, draining and feeding off of its power. As the tree was the elves' greatest treasure, he knew it must be protected at all costs. He assembled the best elven wizards and warriors to train and be ready for an attack at any moment, as well as the magic of the Turians. The servant Sargoth and Rizer were unable to find a new lair, but Sargoth wished to have more power. As he sensed the power and knowledge coming from Kelisnera's great tree, he first had to set his new plan in motion. Sargoth explained to Rizer that elemental crystals were a source of supreme power. If the elemental crystals were to be planted in soil, they would grow into dragons. Depending on the size, power and color of each crystal orb, different dragons would be born at different times and have different properties.
If a dragon is born in darkness, it will be chaotic evil and will aid the darkness. If a dragon is born in the light, it will remain neutral and choose its own path.
Sargoth's plan. The reason for dragons in Dal Ruin is for balance. Sargoth wanted to gather the orbs from the Circle of Seven, and plant them, giving the orbs many years to mature and grow. This was not Sargoth's only plan. He wanted the world to be plunged into darkness, so that all the dragons would turn against the world, plunged into darkness and obey him and aid in Dal Ruin's destruction. This would tip the scales and the light would diminish, leaving chaos and nothingness. This is the plan from the darkness. There was still one question Sargoth had yet to have an answer for. How could he plunge the world into darkness long enough for the dragons to surely hatch in the depths of the shadow? He had yet to come to a conclusion. Sargoth, like the darkness, wanted knowledge of Dal Ruin. So he planned to absorb the knowledge of Kelisnera's great tree, but Sargoth was in for a surprise. The elven forces of Romulus were waiting for him. The battle for Kelisnera. Sargoth informed Rizer to watch over the lair. As he turned into a shadow-like figure and flew out of the top balcony under the grey skies, hissing with evil. To Kelisnera I bring hate and destruction.
I strive for the power of Dal Ruin,
said Sargoth. As he walked towards Neverwind Forest on the outskirts of Kelos. The tree ants were alert and stepped forward. Dark being, our king asks why you have come. The tree ant said. Sargoth stood atop a hill near the forest, standing as tall as the tree ants.
I answer to no creature of this realm.
Sargoth held his hand in the air, charging up what looked to be a ball of darkness. Meanwhile, the king knew his tree ants and other forces would stand no chance against such evil, so he put on his finest equipment. Glowing blue with the haste of the wind-forged armor, King Romulus set out for Sargoth. Upon reaching the scorched remains of a few tree ants, Romulus called out,
Dark One, I am here to face you for rulership of my realm.
The Dark One appeared atop the hill once again. The king felt a fear he had never felt before, but looked it dead in the eyes.
I fight for the light of this world, Dark One. Who do you serve?
The king asked. The servant spoke.
I am Sargoth, bringer of the darkness and destroyer of the light. I am here to bring destruction and harness the power of your tree.
Romulus the king reached to his weapon.
Then comes Sargoth, and diminished the light.
Sargoth flew towards the king, grabbing him in a bound of darkness. With crushing force he squeezed Romulus. His screams of pain were heard all the way to the tree. As Romulus was touched by the darkness, he felt the memory of the darkness enter his mind. He then knew of the orbs and the dragons. He then remembered that King Baron and the humans gifted him the sword made of the transparent crystal, which could be linked to the orbs, as it was planted as needed in the ground atop King Baron's grave. He then called out to the light, and to the tree.
Great tree, I have watched over you for many years. The light needs your help, as do I.
Rumbling came from the ground near the tree. A roar was heard, and the tree exploded into a beam of light that shot to the sky. High winds came and the beam stayed steady to the sky. It looked as if the light was calling forth a great being. Sargoth looked to the sky in terror of the light. He teleported away in an instant, back to his lair. It has been many years since Sargoth has been seen. As now Kelis Nero is guarded by the world's first white dragon of light. Romulus decided it is only fit to name the dragon Dalruan, after the Silver Sword Captain Dalruan, the brave hero who cleansed the land of the demon armies using the fateful blade of Autumn Till. And also, the one who became Dalruan's very first dragon rider. Dalruan once soared the skies watching over the land. But that was long, long ago. And this, my friend, is where your story begins.